Gus, welcome to Real Talk with Star Scorpio. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, Peter. It's nice to see you again, as usual. Go way back, and it's great to be here.
Yeah, Gus, I just want to say for the people before, I'm going to have you introduce yourself. But before we do, I just want to say, I was going to say we're longtime friends, but we're practically family, man. You know what I mean? All the
Mhm.
people that we grew up back in the days with, from Donview to VP to George S. Henry, we're all family. We're all connected. So, and thanks for doing this today,
No,
the
no
podcast.
problem, no problem. Yeah, like those are some fond memories of, our days growing up together and playing basketball, and like those are some really tremendous memories that I feel like the older we get, right, the more those mean so much more because the time goes on, right?
You
So
you
thank you,
got
thank
it. You got it. All right. So Gus Gymnopoulos, introduce yourself. Let the people know what you do because we have a connection to a little family connection with the Wiggins side. But let me know what you do.
Yeah. So currently, right now, I'm in my. I mean, I hate to say this, but I'm in my 20th year of teaching, and I teach at the old Vaughan Secondary School, which is now called Hodan Nalayeh Secondary School. The school went through a name change last year. So I teach there, and I coach the men's prep team, and then I also kind of oversee the entire prep program, where we're starting to like coordinate certain elements of it. And then I'm also I run my own basketball company called Dynamic Basketball, where I do a lot of camps and training for our young kids.
Hmm.
And I am also coaching my two kids teams,
Yeah.
and I'm also the BioSteel All Canadian Game selection committee chair for both the men's and the women's side. So I've been quite busy in the last little while. So
Okay.
it's been good. It's been good, but it's busy but good.
So Gus, let's start from the beginning. I know about you and stuff, but let the people know where were you born and raised?
So I was born in Toronto. I was born in, just like we're near where we grew up, going to school together. And I was raised in that neighborhood, which is the old, Victoria Park and Ellesmere / York Mills area, Parkwoods Plaza. Grew
Yeah.
up in that area playing basketball at Roywood Park with, all those guys that we grew up with, and, a good neighborhood. It was a good neighborhood, and it was the combination of a tough neighborhood and a good neighborhood at the same time.
Yeah.
That like you really had to learn as a youngster to navigate, hooping with older guys and like seeing things, that normally you wouldn't see as a young person, and then kind of navigating those relationships. So it was great growing up in that neighborhood. That's where we met, and I have some really fun memories of it.
Yeah. And back in the days, playing ball outside, it really honed my skills, playing with the older guys. And I think that's what you're alluding to. Even your brother Alex, who I'm going to have on the show, the skills were just impeccable by some of the people we know in the hood.
Yeah, I feel like that sort of, learning, natural learning, it doesn't really exist as much anymore now. I don't want to sound like an old head just
Hmm.
making that, those comments about, oh, back in my day. But I feel like, especially with basketball, it's so organized these days, and
Hmm.
kids are constantly playing with adults where they're doing the work for the kid, and the kid is trying to develop, solely on their skill. But when we grew up playing in a
Yeah.
different era where
Hmm.
we didn't have that structure,
Yeah.
we learned how to navigate and to self-organize and to, develop relationships with people that were older than you, from a different part of the world. It just was just so different, and it made us kind of grow up real quick.
Yes.
And then from a basketball standpoint, I mean, if you lost the game, you're waiting an hour to play again
Yeah.
because your teammates are mad at you for not, closing out on a guy, and he hits that. So then, you have to navigate all that, and it was great. It was great. I have fond memories of those times.
Hmm. And in high school, so you went to Vic Park. First, how were you in school? And also, did you play on the high school basketball team? Because I think you did, right? I was a little bit older than you.
Yeah, you were a couple of years older than me, and I ended up playing for all 5 years of my high school career at Victoria Park Secondary School,
Hmm.
just in North York. I played senior from grade 9. I never played junior. I started out right off with the senior team. Played with guys like Scotty Belasco and Mike
Yeah.
Chisholm and
Yeah.
all those guys are tremendously athletic. And then we kind of got a little bit as those guys graduated, moved on to, guys like John Reed, rest his soul, and Derek Parker and Arby Shanazarian, and guys that were closer to my generation. And we moved through those 5 years at Victoria Park Secondary School. And unfortunately for us at the time, we were as talented and as athletic as, Bathurst Heights, which was our nemesis, but they just were so much more organized and disciplined because of the basketball culture they had at that school that we can never really get over that hurdle.
Yeah.
We were as good as they were, as talented, but just not as organized and disciplined, right? So we, unfortunately for us, we had to always run into them, and we couldn't get out of North York.
Yeah. Wait,
so.
were you in Vic Park when Philip Dixon was playing for Bathurst?
So I came in grade 9 just as he had graduated. Oh. But we had heard of the legend of Phil Dixon at that time and shooting threes from half court and all that. So everyone knew who Phil Dixon was, but I was a little bit younger.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I just have to slide this in here because I said it many times in my podcast. Do you remember our dunk off in Vic Park?
I do. And I remember that my vertical was not even half of yours. So I don't have the greatest memories of that day, but for all of your viewers, I say this to people all the time, like, you still in my mind were the first. Well, actually you're two firsts for me, Peter. And what I mean by that is that you were the first guy that actually had like crazy vertical bounce that I remember clearly. And I remember you doing a standing vertical reverse, kind of where you caught it down and you went behind your head from standing vertical.
Yeah.
And I'm taller than you. And I was like, I couldn't believe you did that. And then you were also the first guy that we knew at that time that had like a relative that was in the NBA.
Yeah.
It was Mitch Wiggins for the Houston Rockets. And I remember you telling us, like, Mitch Wiggins, Houston Rockets, and we were all blown away because at that time, like, kids in Toronto, like, there was no guy that knew a guy from the NBA.
Yeah.
Like, it was just unheard of as compared to today, where, kids today might even train with a guy from the NBA in the same gym, on the same court, which is, so the game has really changed, right? So that was kind of cool. But I do remember that dunk contest, and I do remember, you were a better dunker than me. Let's just put that right out there. It's not even a comparison, so I'm okay with that.
Yo, thanks for that. But I got to tell you, I think you saved me because your first dunk was a windmill dunk. My dunk was a 360, and I hung on the rim, and they disqualified me. And I was upset. I went in the change room. I don't know if you spoke to someone for me, but then they said, you're still in, you get your second dunk and all that.
Yeah, it was silly. Like, I mean, to disqualify somebody from a dunk contest for hanging on the rim and trying to be like a little bit more flamboyant and just trying to, pump up the crowd, right? Like, it was silly. And, why they do that sort of thing. Like, I mean, who knows? But I do remember it. And it was fun. It was fun for sure.
Nice. Okay, now, after high school, where did you go? And did you know what you wanted to do? Was basketball always your trajectory, your path?
Yeah. So after high school, I remember being in my 5th year at Vic Park. And I remember because I was a dual sport athlete. Actually, I played 3 sports. I played football, basketball, and baseball. Okay. So in my 5th year of high school, my baseball coach, my basketball coach, and my football coach all wanted me to return for my 6th year, because back in those days, our victory lap was our 6th year, right? As compared to these days where the victory lap is the 5th year, the post-grad year. And I just remember being done with high school. I remember feeling like, although I think we would have had a great ball team coming back for year 6, because we had a lot of talented athletes come to the school the year before, I just felt like I was done with it. A lot of my friends were moving on, and I couldn't envision myself going back for another year of high school. I really wanted to move on. At the time, I was recruited by the University of Toronto, Ryerson, and Laurentian coming out of high school for CIS. I mean, to get to the Division I level back then I found it was a little bit more challenging, but the reality was I don't think I was good enough as a basketball player to get to that really ultra high level. I was an okay player, medium of the road type of guy in terms of that level. So I ended up going to the CIS, and then I ended up, I felt like I wanted to move away from home. So I ended
Okay.
up applying to Concordia University, and I made a couple of phone calls to the head coach over there, a guy by the name of John Doerr. And he didn't really know me, but he made a couple of calls to some of the, all these CIS coaches at the time.
Okay.
They know each other.
Mhm.
Now it's called U Sports, but back then it was called CIS. So they made a couple of phone calls, and I actually packed up my family minivan with my parents,
What?
and we literally just drove to Montreal. We didn't know
Okay.
where we were going to live. I didn't know if I was going to be on the ball team. All I know is I got an acceptance letter from the university.
Mhm.
And here we are in the summertime, like late August, moving to Montreal. And we literally got there and we started doing apartment shopping at that time. And we drove around to 30 or 40 different places. We finally landed on a place. A couple of days later, I went into the Concordia walk-in tryout.
Mhm.
And fortunately for me, I actually made the team. And then I
Yeah.
spent my 5 years playing for the men's basketball team at Concordia University in Montreal.
Oh,
So that's
nice,
kind of
man.
how it was a risk, though. It was a risk. It was an
I,
actual risk.
without risk, reward, man. I like that. I
Yeah.
like that. I didn't know that.
Mhm.
And what did you study while you were in Concordia?
So I studied. I had a believe it or not, I had a major in economics, and then I had a minor in mathematics.
Mhm.
And then in my third year of university, I tore my left ACL because my plan at the time was to try to play pro basketball in Greece because I'm Greek and my parents were born in Greece, and I was going to apply for like a Greek passport to be able
Okay.
to play as a local, because back then they had rules where international players, there's only a couple, and then the rest of the people on the team were local. So I thought I can compete with the Greek guys.
Mhm.
Obviously, I'm not going to compete with the American guys. I wasn't good enough. I
Yeah.
thought I
Okay.
could do it, and then I tore my ACL when I was in my third year, and I kind of knew at that moment that my basketball career was done. So what that led me to do is it led me to focus more on my academics
Mhm.
and start to kind of feel like, what am I going to do after basketball, because that injury really hurt me. And my athleticism was cut in half. You lose
Wow.
your quickness, that whole bit. So I ended up thinking about teaching. I wanted to stay involved in the game
Mhm.
of basketball, but at the same time, I couldn't picture myself being in a corporate environment or working at a bank or sitting like at a teller. Like I just couldn't picture myself doing that. I was too much like a too high energy for that sort of life. And I thought teaching would be the ultimate sort of combination of, you could still coach and be involved with young kids, and at the
Mhm.
same time it's not as boring for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be in the financial or corporate world, and that's how that journey kind of began.
And what age is this now that you're talking about?
I tore my ACL in my third year university. Right at the start of the year, we were actually playing Ryerson, and I drove left, and I came to a jump stop, tore the ACL. I was 21 years old, and I was in my
Ooh.
third year of university in 97.
Mhm.
And that sort of was a blessing in disguise, to be honest with you, because, at the end of the day, I wasn't a good enough player to make a substantial living playing basketball. Like I'll be the first to admit it. I'm not ashamed of it. I was a
Mhm.
decent player, but I was not at that level to get any significant compensation from playing this sport. So it was actually a blessing, because it helped me refocus my life into a direction that I'm still doing today. And 21 years later, 20 years later, 21 years later, I'm still doing it. So it's interesting how that divergent path occurs, right?
Mhm.
As a young person.
Wow. I'm learning your story for the first time. I like this.
Mhm.
Okay. And now we get into Vaughan Collegiate. So how did that start? Let me
So
know.
it didn't actually start right at Vaughan. When I finished teachers college at the University of Toronto, I applied, or I got a job in Regent Park. So I
Okay.
worked at a school called Nelson Mandela Park Public School for 3 years, where I taught physical education, and those were some
Okay.
of the best. Those are some of the best teaching years of my life at the beginning, because Regent Park is a really dynamic community,
Mhm.
and I have a lot of respect for the community and the challenges that a lot of the young people there were facing at that time.
Right.
If you go to Regent Park now, you see the gentrification of the neighborhood and how it's really changed
It's
compared to
changed.
what it was when I was there.
Yeah.
The kids were the best.
Mhm.
They were so amazing. I love those kids. I learned a lot from them. and the challenges that they faced as young people. And it was incredible. And I think that that experience gave me the equity mindset that I use in my teaching career moving forward, in terms of like understanding sort of systemic, barriers that people have, and what can we do to loosen those barriers for people to become successful. And I've always used that experience in my teaching career to be very equity minded and to understand where kids are coming from, as opposed to just giving them like the old Peter Lawrence, you're disqualified because you hung on the rim mentality, if that makes sense. If that makes sense, right?
I get where you're going with this.
Right. Yeah. Like, it's kind of like, what can we do to support kids? And I think that those 3 years, and then from there, basically, I'll tell you a funny story. So how I ended up at Vaughan Secondary School from Regent Park, from Nelson Mandela, was like, I was playing, I had hurt my low back. I have a bit of a low back issue. And I had hurt my low back, and I was out of work for like 2 or 3 weeks. I was sitting at home. And, my buddies were playing in a men's league at George Brown College. And they called me and they said, Gus, like, we need a fifth guy. Like, we don't have a fifth guy. I'm like, guys, my back is no good. And I was with, the guys, I was with Eddie McGarrian and Harvey Nazarian, and I believe John Reed was on our team, and that group. So, I said, I can't play. And they begged me. And they said, just come to the game. All we need you to do is step on the court, and then you can sub off. We'll play with 4, but the rule is you got to start with 5. Right?
Okay.
So I got to the game, and I ended up playing the game, but I was very ginger. Like, I was delicate, right? Like,
yeah, but wait, you were a shooter too. So were you just?
Yeah, exactly. And actually in that game, I never went inside. I just wanted to catch and shoot and maybe we played a little zone defense and so on and so forth. And John Glazakos, who is, you probably remember John, he's a referee, got a mustache. I'll show you a picture later of him.
Okay.
And I remember John because he used to referee our games when we were in high school. Right? Okay. So John was the vice principal at Vaughan Secondary School. So we finished the game. Funny enough, one of our guys actually got ejected in that game. Yeah. Not me. One of our guys got ejected for saying something to the other ref. And at the end of the game, we're sitting around, and I think we lost. And John comes up to me and he said, "Hey, Gus, like, do you want a full-time phys ed job?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, you're a basketball guy and you're a teacher. And he goes, "We just lost our basketball coach at Vaughan Secondary School." Wow. And I was like, "Well, John, I've been in elementary for 3 years. I don't really know much about high school curriculum, although I was high school trained." He's like, "Don't worry about it. Just come to the interview and talk about basketball." I was like, "Really?" I'm like, yeah. He goes, "Yeah." So I actually, he goes, "The interview's tomorrow." I'm like, "What?" Like, "John, I'm not ready for this." He's like, "Just come tomorrow, talk about basketball. You'll be fine." Yeah. So I just got my suit on, right, shirt and tie. I went to Vaughan the next day, like whatever time it was, and I had an interview. And by Monday, I got the call, and I went from elementary school to high school. That's where I ended up at Vaughan, and kind of the rest is history. I ended up there.
Wow, I like your story, but just going back for a minute, I like how you talked about your experience in Regent Park, right? So we grew up in a diverse neighborhood. So we had, well-rounded background in a lot of cultures. Then you've seen that area where we can call a lot of people were in poverty, and there's a lot of crime in Regent Park, and a lot of people had challenges. So I like how you had that experience growing up, which kind of prepared you for your time at Vaughan with high school students.
Yeah, because in my opinion, there's no such thing as a bad kid. Like, you would never hear the word bad kid coming out of my mouth, because there could be less experienced kid, there could be a kid that has a bunch of things stacked up against them. So really, when you peel back the layers for a kid, you can kind of figure out what it is. Like, let's say a kid gets into a fight, doesn't mean they're a bad kid. Right? It means, like, what is it that's causing that sort of thing? And then if you can get to the root of it, then you can help that young person sort of move forward. Right. And I think that experience at Regent Park really taught me, because, you see a kid in your class and they're so sweet and kind, and then another person looks at them like they're a really bad person. They don't want to give them the time of day, but them at a different level.
Mhm.
And I think that's the essence of sort of being a person in education that has that mindset. And
Mhm.
I learned that in Region real quick,
Yeah.
which was really good for the trajectory of my career, right?
Mhm.
And especially in basketball too, right?
Mhm.
I mean, because when we grew up, like we were sort of like, people were looking at basketball players like we were like bad kids all the time, like we
Yeah.
were ready to get into trouble, right?
Yeah.
Like, and a lot of that still exists, believe it or not, right?
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So now tell me about your trajectory. So the foundation, your first year of Vaughan, and how you built up your name now. And I think I can say this. A lot of kids respect you at Vaughan with your skills and what you teach. And then kind of slide in how you met Andrew Wiggins.
Yeah. So my first year of at Vaughan, I actually ended up coaching the junior team. So they had brought me in to coach the senior team, but the head coach at the time, his name is AJ Sharma. AJ Sharma is a very successful coach. Actually, he's the two-time national championship coach at Women's Humber College, and I think they're actually playing like right now.
Okay.
So he ended up deciding to come back. So I slid in and I took the junior team. And at that time, my first glimpse with one of the Wiggins kids was Mitch Wiggins. So Mitch
Mitch.
was the oldest of the six kids, right?
Mhm.
And again, like a super kind, super nice young man, like just so pleasant to be around, but like so athletic.
Mhm.
So I went from coaching, I played in university and then I went coaching 3 years in elementary school, and then you get to high school, and then now Mitch is in 10th grade.
Yeah.
No, sorry, not in 10th. Yeah, was he in? I don't remember now, but and he's just like, yeah, I think he was in 10th grade, and he was just like banging on the rim, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, it was just a cool experience, like no problem for Mitch. And then, from starting to coach that junior team, and seeing his dad Mitch
Mhm.
come to the games in Merida, then like I knew Mitch from before because we used to play in some men's leagues against one another
Oh,
up when he was up in Newmarket. He was doing some basketball stuff up there.
okay.
We used to, so I knew Mitch. I knew, like, when he came
Okay. I
in, it
didn't know
wasn't
that.
like a strange introduction because we played against one another quite a bit in some men's leagues, and so then that kind of propelled from there, right? So then, that journey started with me coaching juniors for a couple of years.
Mhm.
And then specifically for the Wiggins boys. Then Nick came in grade 9,
Yeah.
and he was part of the team. And then at the time, I was the assistant coach to AJ Sharma for the senior program, but I was still the junior coach. So I had Nick and on my team. Then Mitch moved up, and then Nick moved up, and then I took over the senior program at that time.
Mhm.
AJ went on to Humber to be the women's coach, and then that's where I took over the seniors. And then we ended up picking up a guy by the name of Josh Collins. So Mitch, Nick, and Josh were sort of our big three. And then we started to make some noise in the high school scene where we started to actually compete against Pickerings of the world and
Yeah.
Houstons of the world. And then when Drew came, like now we were like the top.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's kind of how that started,
Mhm.
right? Like it was a good 4 or 5 year process before we were able to build the program to where it needed to be. And then, when we won OFSA with Drew's year, like we were like the top of we were like in 2 years, we were like 90-5. Like we hardly ever lost in those couple of years. So it was great.
Mhm. And do you have the scouts? Because I remember back in the days where there were scouts looking for potential players for the NBA, but first college, right? I should say, right? Because I believe Andrew went to Huntington Prep. But do you have the scouts that look out for the talent there?
Yeah, like in Ontario. You mean in Ontario or at our school or
Schools
like?
first. Like, do you have the scouts at the schools or did Ontario's and things like that?
So basically, there has always been scouts that come to Ontario to recruit kids from the
Mhm.
US.
Mhm.
But traditionally, and again, I'm going kind of way back here, but traditionally it was the Phil Dixons of the world or the Jamal McGlures of the world,
Mhm.
those guys that were, really uber talented that drew that crowd in
Okay.
the greater Toronto area to recruit. But as the basketball scene in Ontario started to explode, now you're
Mhm.
getting more and more college coaches coming to the region because they know that there's a lot of talent here. Like it's a pretty huge population in the greater Toronto area. So it attracts those coaches to come here. So now it's like an everyday occurrence where people come and scout. For our time at the beginning of the program, there was, mostly, Canadian universities and colleges that would come. But then as, we did have a lot of Division I players at Vaughan before that.
Okay.
The way that they were recruited, sometimes you had to send out film and you had to be more creative with the style of approach that you took to get a kid a Division I look. But then as, the game changed, now all these guys are coming here. And when Andrew, the first day of school, when Andrew was in 10th grade, like Purdue University had called the phys ed office. I'm like, what? Like Purdue's calling? And then like, I kid you not, like half an hour later, Syracuse called and said, a guy by the name of Bernie Fine, he's like, I'm coming to your practice.
Yeah.
So like, I'm like, okay, we're ready to practice, like our second practice this season, and Syracuse University is coming to watch. Right. So they all wanted Andrew right off the bat, even though he was only 15 years old. So it was happening. It was actually happening. And NBA people were calling too. Like a lot of NBA people were calling to inquire. And, the NBA, I forgot what part of the NBA Players Association somewhere in New York had called, or I forgot what entity of the NBA it was. And I was like, what's going on here? Right. Like, it was insane for me because it was all new to me at that time. Right. So I never had to experience something like that before. So it was cool.
Yeah. And tell me about some of the talent now that's coming up. If I throw a name to you, let me know if you coached him or anything. Nickeil Alexander, is it? He went to school with my daughter, I believe.
Wow.
And then quick story. I remember Nickeil wanted Andrew's autograph. So one day I went to the house and I got the autograph for him and he was so happy. And then what do you know? Later on, this guy's being scouted and now he's in the NBA. But did you cross paths with him?
Not only did I cross paths, but Nickeil went to our school. I don't know if you knew that.
When it was Vaughan.
Yes.
Okay, I don't think I knew that.
Yes. So Nickeil, there's like a family connection between the Alexanders and the Walkers, and some of them had gone to Vaughan. So, Nickeil Walker was one of the relatives of Nickeil, and he played for me. Nickeil played for 3 years before moving on to a prep school in the United States. And excuse me. And I recruited Nickeil when he was in 7th and 8th grade, because he was like super talented and he was like, he loved the game. Like he had a great personality. And, Vaughan at the time was like the place to go to for high school basketball. So Nickeil came and he played a couple of years of junior. He played about not even about a quarter of a season for me at senior. And then he ended up transferring to a prep in the United States, which was good for him. Because it allowed him to get to that next level, which he was seeking. So yeah, I know Nickeil well. His mom actually did an interview at our school a couple of weeks ago. So I got to talk to her again, and we know them quite well. Great kid, and just super fun to be around, and really, really hardworking. So yeah, I do know Nickeil, and that's pretty cool that he went to the same elementary school as me. That's really cool.
A lot of connections. So I got a question for you, Gus, man. What would you like to be remembered by as a coach with your former players?
Honestly, like I don't care about accolades. I don't care about wins. I don't care about any of that stuff. What I do want to be remembered as a coach is a decent human that had their best interest at heart. Yeah. And oftentimes, like I feel like people's egos get in the way of their coaching decisions, and I try to always put mine to the side to do what's best for the player and the kid. And that's why I've maintained sort of the culture of our program at the school to be not run as a business. So we don't run it as a business. None of the coaching staff gets paid. We do it as a school-based program because it gives kids an opportunity to play sports at a reasonable cost. And that's the most important thing to me, is to have relationships with those guys. I don't really care about the rest of it, to be honest with you. Like wins and games and all that, that's all fun. Like no one wants to lose games, but that at the end of the day, that doesn't matter. It's, do you have a good relationship with those kids, and do they value the stuff that you try to help them with. And at the same time, never try to take advantage of their success and make it your success. Like, I think, again, that's another one that, you know, people do. They try to latch on to a successful guy, and that he's my guy. And they know they're not your guy. They're their parents' guy. That's their family, right? That sort of mentality. And I think if you can do that, you know, you can have like long lasting relationships, because people know that, you know, you're a decent human being and that you value them as a human, not necessarily as a basketball player. Right. So which is more important. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask this now, and I think you kind of answered it, but I'd like to hear from you. What is the most important contribution you've made on the youth you've coached?
The most important contribution that I made as a youth coach?
On the kids that you've coached, what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something similar to what I always said, like, you know, having, you know, it's more of the day-to-day process that's the most important thing, as opposed to like any one particular moment. Because at the end of the day, you can't really make change in one moment. Like, it's the day-to-day grind. It's the phone call as to like, why are you not in class? It's the, you know, you do better. Like, you know, why did you argue with your teacher? Like, why? Like, it's those day-to-day things that I think are the most important factors for the contribution for young people. It's not the one-offs. It's not the glamour when the lights are on. It's those day-to-day interactions that I feel like are the most important thing. Like, you know, in terms of any one moment, I mean, there are just so many moments that I feel like impact kids. Like, for example, like when we run our alumni game, right? Like, that is a very powerful moment for kids, because they come back. All these alumni come back and they're like 32 years old and they're still dunking the ball. And it's like, you know, the 14-year-olds are looking at it, the 16-year-olds are looking like, wow, there's a great culture here. So like, that would be an example of one moment, but that's not like, it doesn't work in on it itself, right? I feel like it's more of the day-to-day stuff that is most impactful for young people. If they know you, if they know you have their back for them, they're going to run through a brick wall for you. If they know that you're doing it for yourself and you're just kind of, you know, using them for like your own kind of goals, it's not going to work out.
Thanks for sharing that. And, you know, I've interviewed a lot of people, and I always ask this question because sometimes I think people need words of inspiration. Someone might be on the point of giving up. So do you have any words to share for someone that is ready to give up? And when I say that, it could be in anything, their career, basketball career, professional career, anything, trying to be an entrepreneur and getting out there. But because of where you come from, do you have any words to share that someone's at that point of giving up?
I do. I think it's a combination of things. I think it's important to have a goal and to write it down. You know, so let's say if you're an entrepreneur or a basketball player, and I'll give you the example of a basketball player because that's the kind of the world I live in, but let's say your goal is to make it to the NCAA. Okay. So writing down your goal is the first step, but that cannot be your only mentality. So you can't say like, you know, I'm going to be an NCAA player or bust, because what you're doing right now is you're thinking about the future, but then there's an entire process that goes into getting to that goal. So I find a lot of disappointment and failure in basketball players, and you could probably make the same argument for people in their career and in the world, is that there's a mountain there and that they want to get to the top, but they're forgetting that they have to actually climb the mountain to get there. And if you focus on climbing the mountain, I feel like mentally you'll be in a better position to not have as much pressure on yourself to get to the pinnacle, because you're so focused on getting there that it makes the process much more enjoyable. So for people that are going through challenging times, especially basketball players, sometimes you got to get them to refocus on their priority, and their priority could be just to win that day. And if they win that day, you know, and they win the next day, then all of a sudden they're in a much more positive space. And one of the things that I tell people all the time is like, you know, you want to water, you know, the flowers, don't water the weeds. Wow. And if you're constantly looking at the pinnacle, like you're thinking only about that, and if things don't go your way, then you're really watering those weeds, and mentally you're just going to be in a shambles, as compared to like, you know, winning that day and trying to get better each and every day. to get there. It's just a much more positive mentality. And I feel like in that you can make that application for any facet of life. That's one of the ways that we use kids and coach them up.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Oh, man. So, Gus, we come to the point in the interview where I have two cards here. You're going to, by my hands, you tell me which one you want me to read, and we'll have you answer it. By my hands, right or left? Which one do you want me to read?
I'll go with right.
What is one of the most memorable moments of your life?
Wow. Okay, that's pretty powerful. I would say one of the most memorable moments of my life is when my son was born, because that was like a very awe-inspiring moment, like where it's just like it's you and your wife, and you're starting a life together, and then all of a sudden here's this human that's just being delivered in your lap. And I remember those feelings, and then that really kind of takes your love to another level as a person. Mm-hmm. So I would probably say that was, the most inspiring. And then obviously, like, then your second child is born. Like, I have two kids, and those really shape who you are, and it really takes your life into a completely different angle. So I would say that was probably the one that was the most impactful, for sure.
Nice. Thanks for sharing. And before I get into the balloon pot, because I'm going to donate to a charity today. Okay. But the kid, you're training your kids basketball, right? I seen you Instagram post of your son, I think, shooting, man. He looks like he's going to be a shooter, man.
Well, I hope so. Like, he's working hard every day to try to improve his skills. And I think that, it's like I said, there's a mountain, right?
Yeah.
So there's all this piece. So how hard you want to work and how hard you want to climb to get to where you need to go. And that's the difference, right? So, but hopefully, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Gus. Okay, we come to the point in the interview. I have 3 balloons in my hand. Season 3, this is episode 3. So the charities for this season, it's Claws. Claws is a volunteer group of people that help out stray and abandoned animals in the Kawartha Lakes area in Ontario. Okay. Autism Ontario. And also I have CAMH, Center for Addiction and Mental Health. So again, by my hands, which balloon do you want me to pop?
Okay. And then let me know too. I like to contribute to whatever you contribute to. So you let me know after the show about that.
Appreciate it.
Great. Let's stay with the right theme. Let's go with the one on your right.
Season 3, episode 3. The third charity that Star Scorpio is donating to is, this is the second time, Claws.
All right. You let me know after the show too, Peter.
I will. And I appreciate that because Z, who I interviewed, our friend Z from back in the days when I interviewed him DJing, he actually contributed to, he matched my donation. Awesome. I appreciate you coming out today. This is episode 3 in the books, and we out.